Hi everybody, today we are going to paint some floral portraits. We will use the same technique we applied in two previous exercises, portraits and simple flowers. I've linked those videos in the description, so feel free to check them out if you'd like to see how we created those. We'll start with the concept. We will incorporate florals into the portraits, and that's it. It's that simple. First, we'll begin with sketching out the compositions. I'm thinking of the figures with flowers surrounding them, perhaps the flowers partially covering facial features like the mouth or eyes. It's a simple concept, but if well executed, it can result into something very unique. This will create an interesting visual effect and add depth to the piece. Other thing to consider is the character design itself. We can keep the human features natural or play with proportions and make something more whimsical. But for now, we will stick with a more natural look, saving the fantasy elements for future videos. I have already transferred my sketch into the paper and I'm using acrylics on an A2 sized acrylic paper. As always, I start by staining the background with a neutral color. I began with a darker base color, and then we add layers of lighter hue of the same blend, as working in layers adds depth to the composition. The main portrait features a black woman, and I'm starting with a deep blue tone. I mixed about 6% cerulean blue with 40% black to achieve a rich, intense shade. Note that this is not a realistic portrait, so we are not focusing on shadows, highlights, or even detailed facial features. However, it is important to paint by making the brush flow, following the natural lines, so that it will create a natural texture that will add visual interest to the composition. Once dry, I'll add a layer of burnt amber, which blends nicely with the background. Next, I'll paint the florals using the same technique that we practiced with the watercolors. This, once again, isn't meant to be realistic, but rather a stylized composition. The key elements here are contrast, color harmony, and simplicity. Acrylics can sometimes be translucent depending on the brand and pigment strength. So layering is essential to achieving the desired color intensity. I'll continue building up layers until I reach the color I want. And here it is, our first painting for today. It's minimal and yet it's very interesting. For our second composition, I will use once again the mix of white, burnt sienna, and cerulean blue to create a soft background. And this is the same mix I am using to the woman's skin tone. To add contrast, the dark hair is using the same black tone from the previous portrait. Remember to paint in the direction of the natural movement. For example, following the flow of the hair, because that will add texture and depth. Once again, we are not aiming for realism, but for a stylized composition that speaks for itself. For the flowers, we are using the same technique we used in the botanical compositions that we've done previously. They are very simple, so I'm painting them directly into the paper without sketching. The main impact of this portrait comes from the high contrast of its elements, the main subject itself, the background, and the flowers weaving in and out. Acrylics dry very quickly. So if you want to preserve your paint mix for the next day, cover your palette with plastic wrap because this keeps the paint from drying out overnight. For instance, I began this painting late in the evening and I had to continue the next morning. By then, the paint on the paper was fully dry, of course, because acrylics only takes 5 minutes to be completely dry. But my saved palette was still usable, allowing me to seamlessly continue the piece. And here it is, our second painting for today. I like it very much. Yes, I think we are going in a very nice direction. Okay, so now our final painting for today. While the first two paintings took around 30-35 minutes each, this one was more rushed up because I was running out of time and it was finished within 20 minutes. Nonetheless, I feel I could have benefited from more simplicity. This time I chose to paint the roses and I use a mix of red for the base, umber for the shadows, and I'm layering it with some light pink for the highlights. Once again, these are not meant to be realistic flowers, but stylized elements that complement the portrait. And remember, you can combine different techniques from previous exercises, from previous projects. And that's the beauty of what we're doing, okay? We keep on exploring different mixes. Looking at the final results, I love the flat graph quality of the first two paintings. The third one is still okay, but it would have been stronger if I had kept it simpler. And here are the results. I hope it will inspire you to keep on exploring different mixes to your own compositions. So next weekend, we will explore more portrait variations. So I hope to see you there. As always, keep on practicing and thank you for joining us.